So Billy, thanks so much for stopping by today to chat with us.
Hey, thank you, John.
A pleasure to have you, sir. So the rumor is you grew up in Yadkin County, North Carolina, and I actually went to graduate school not too far from there. I actually have a friend that grew up in Yadkinville. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your just, Reader's Digest version of what it was like growing up there. What did you hear about success and money and business and all those kind of things growing up in rural North Carolina?
Yeah, well, that's good. It is a small world, if you know Yadkinville. I did grow up in Yadkin County and basically grew up on a tobacco farm. My father and grandfather ran a farm supply business and raised tobacco. And I tell people it was a unbelievable way to grow up, and you just learn so many things. Number one, a lot of things were centered around the church as we grew up, but living and working on the farm teaches you all kinds of work ethics, disciplines, and things that have really helped me later in life. They were a lot of the early things that helped me as I grew up. As I did grow up from there, I went to NC State, and unfortunately, during my freshman year, my father passed away unexpectedly, and shortly after, my grandfather committed suicide. So at the age of 19, I came home to take care of my mom and two younger sisters in what was a really difficult time in the late 70s. Economic conditions were bad, and a lot of stress. But fortunately, I had some good mentors. I went to school on nights and weekends, and eventually they taught me into taking the GMAT to get into graduate school, and I scored high enough that Wake Forest MBA program took me without an undergraduate degree. And it was there that I learned how to read a balance sheet, and more importantly, learned about a thing called owner financing that really helped me buy my first business and get into business.
Very good. Who are some of your early role models growing up?
Well, I'd have to say that early on, it was my father and grandfather. From day one, I think it was destiny. They treated me, even when I was a young kid, like I was part of the leadership team making decisions. But after them, there was an entrepreneur in Winston-Salem named Don Angel, who did a lot of entrepreneurial things, especially in the nursing home business, but also in the hotel and hospitality business that really was a big role model to me and helped me a lot in those days. And then as you go on, I started looking at people and had the opportunity to meet people like Bernie Marcus that started Home Depot, and Chris Sullivan, who started Outback Steakhouses, and listen to their entrepreneurial endeavors. And that really got me hooked on the bug of, hey, I can make something big out of some of these ideas.
Were you always motivated to be an entrepreneur? Were you that kid with a lemonade stand or selling eggs door to door growing up?
I was. I always had an idea, and my parents and grandfather encouraged me to go into business. I'll never forget. My grandfather told me, said, Billy, if you are smart enough to make money for somebody else, you're smart enough to be in business for yourself and make that money for yourself and build a business like we have here in the farm supply business. And so I always wanted to be in business.
Yeah. And what great advice and encouragement from your parents to get you going and thinking that way, right? That's a great way of putting it. You're smart enough to make it for other people. You can smart enough to figure it out for yourself.
It's simple, but there's a lot of truth in it.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So you grew up, and then you started this company, Blue Rhino, which is one of the largest refillable propane exchanges, right? That were, I believe it was the largest in the United States. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, yes. We're probably the largest in the world, but certainly the largest in North America.
Yeah. So how did that come to be? Like, did you just see the idea and went after it, or did some kind of moment happen that sparked the origin story for that company?
Yeah, and let me share that story with you. One of my early businesses was a petroleum distribution business, and that's where we had convenience stores, gasoline stations. We had a small propane home heating oil business, and my wife and I won a trip to Europe. And while we were in Paris, I noticed that all these propane tanks were stacked around the gas stations. And I had the taxi to stop and translate for me what the guy told me they did with them. And it turned out that they were exchanging tanks. It was butane in Europe instead of propane, but basically the same thing. Instead of refilling the tanks the way we did here in the US at the time. This is in the late 80s. So I came back and started testing what I thought was an interesting concept in some of our convenience stores. And one day, the local Walmart manager came by my office, walked in and said, Billy, said, we've got a problem at Walmart. Said, we sell hundreds of gas grills every week, but have nowhere to send our customers to buy gas. Would you think about putting this kind of service in Walmart? At that time, I was just, it was a small test and we were a really small company, but the light bulb went off and I decided that was my opportunity to really do something significant. And we did.
So you got really excited about this idea that sparked from the Walmart conversation. And then, like, what were some of the lessons you learned, I guess, big picture? Because you started the company and you grew the company, and then you exited the company, right?
Right.
What are some of, like, for those that are business leaders on here, what are some big lessons taking that business from the initial idea all the way through to the exit?
Yeah. I'll tell you a couple of interesting points that come to mind. Number one, we did start this from a business plan, and I wrote a business plan while I was traveling to South Africa on a photographic safari. And one of the things I told my wife is we had been in this commodity gasoline petroleum business, and I said, I have to brand this company somehow that it can distinguish itself from my competitors in some way. And so as I was writing the business plan and making photographs in South Africa, took a picture of the Rhino, and I decided he was this tough, sturdy character that looked like a tank. I got a graphic artist to put the blue flame in propane on his horn, and I was hoping that it would do for us what the Pink Panther did for Owens Corning in making a character that you could do something with. People thought I was crazy. They thought that was the craziest thing in the world, but it stuck and people remembered it, and it really worked. And it was a big part of our success is having that branding and recognition that others didn't have. So that was one thing is to brand it. I would say another thing that in some of the difficulties, I knew day one that it was going to be a land grab. In other words, I needed to grow as fast as I could. And at that time, the public markets were pretty open in the 90s. It was a great place to raise capital. So we planned on going public early. We did to raise the capital to grow fast, and it worked. But being a public company has its downside too. Although it gives you access to capital and liquidity, fact was they expect you to meet every quarterly earnings report. And in 2001, I will never forget, the price of propane escalated above the cost that we were selling people like Walmart and Home Depot for. And so when I went back to try to renegotiate my contract, showing them that the price of propane had risen so much that it wouldn't be economical or affordable for me to continue at this price, they looked at me and said, do we not have a contract till the end of the year? And I said, yes. But they said, well, if you can't fulfill it, tell us so, and we'll try to find somebody else that can fulfill it. But you need to be here till the end of the year. Our stock price went from 23 to 2 to tell the market that. Terrible times, terrible. And I had to live through all of the, investor feedback and really the realities of it. But I knew that if we could get through December 31st and readjust our retail price, everything would be fine. And so we hung together, scraped together enough money to get through that period of time, got through it, and for the next 3 years, we were the best performing stock, but to get through that period of time.
So what was your key lesson from that happening as far as a leader of a company? Is it?
It is to have resilience.
Yeah.
And you have to be honest with yourself and your employees, making sure that I kept our employees engaged, excited, and communicating to them that here's the situation, here's where we need to get to, and we'll be fine, and give them a piece of the pie. So at that time, we had to make sure that we were incenting our employees to get through this 6-month ugly time with huge losses and a lot of people saying that we were going to go bankrupt.
I see. So being proactive and being honest with them and then just buckling up and being resilient through that time. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that is a lesson learned that I always remember, we all focus around and we need to focus on the things that we can control, but we also need to take time to do the risk analysis of the what if situations. Like today, what happens with a recession? What happens with the Chinese tariffs? What happens if? And I do much more of that today than I did at that time.
Productive paranoia, huh?
Yes.
I think that's what Jim Collins calls it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, productive paranoia. Okay, some great lessons there. One about creating a brand, right? You really felt that having a character or a symbol or a brand around Blue Rhino helped it be recognizable and rememberable, if that's the right word, rememberable. Resilience through tough times, and then of course the last point that you just made, which was more around productive paranoia and kind of going through the what if scenarios so they don't blindside you, basically, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. One of your interviews, you talked about the importance of getting the right people, particularly people who have the skill sets to manage a growing company, let's say 5 years into the future. Can you talk about why it's so important to get the right people there for projected growth? And also, like, how do you find those skill sets, or how do you screen those skill sets?
Yes. One of the learnings is when you're developing and growing a company rapidly, you need to hire for where you're going to be 3 to 5 years out. Because even though you probably can't afford the person today, or you don't feel like you can afford that person, the issue is going to come back to haunt you 18 to 24 months down the road when they have the skill set to manage 10 people, not 200 people, or they are not there to help you plan the strategy and the other things. So what I try to do now, and what I try to tell people, is when you are raising your money, when you are putting your plans together and your people plan together, you need to do it of where you're going to be 3 to 5 years out, not just try to hire the type of people you can afford today, hoping to get to that next level.
Got it. So that's part of your business plan and your financing is to actually put that in there so that you can hire somebody who has an upper level skill set versus just trying to cheap out in the near term.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Very good. So you sold Blue Rhino and exited that, and then you started a new company, Primo Water, which is I believe you're still the chairman of the board there.
Right.
So what was that like? What was that transition like? So you stepped away from Blue Rhino, you sold that, and did you just have this desire to like start something else, or what was the spark for starting a water company?
Yeah. Well, we did sell Blue Rhino, but I can't say it was because I really wanted to sell. You see, as a public company, you're expected to continue growth each and every quarter and each and every year. Well, by 2004, Blue Rhino had more locations than McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King combined in the US. So if you had fast food in your town, you had Blue Rhino. So we were pretty much everywhere. So we had to look as a public company of, okay, how are we going to grow this company? And so I looked in Brazil and Mexico and China, all the fast growing areas. And unfortunately, all those areas, propane is regulated. In other words, you have to buy it from the government, and then you have to turn around and sell it for whatever the government says. So the business model really didn't work in any of these countries. So as I started pondering what our opportunities were, a guy named Jim Farrell, who owned an MLP in Kansas City, came in and made us an all-cash offer. It was a great deal for everyone. He agreed to keep the headquarters in Winston-Salem, to operate as a separate Blue Rhino business unit, agreed to everything we wanted. And everybody was happy. We all made plenty of money, and it was a good thing. But it's hard to sell your baby. It was really difficult. And I stepped back, and Mr. Farrell wanted me to be a part of the ongoing company, but it was his company. And I looked at him one day and I said, Mr. Farrell, he knew my story. I said, I've never been an employee. And I said, I'm not sure I would make a good employee. I'm an entrepreneur. And I said, I'll be glad to be on your board. I'll help you in any way. I certainly want to see it be a success, and it certainly has been. But I said, I think I'm made to do something different. And so I stepped away. I thought about it for a while, and I realized that God didn't put me here to lie on the beach and do nothing. He gave me some skills. And at that time, Home Depot and Lowe's Home Improvement had both asked me to create a Blue Rhino-like program for 5-gallon bottled water. So I took a young MBA student, and we put together another business plan, looked at the market. We saw how fast water was growing. That we felt like this health and wellness aspect is going to have a long runway. And I started again with a sheet of paper and writing a business plan. And fortunately, here we are. And we've grown it to, about a $500 million market cap, and took it public. And it's a great company with great people, and I enjoy it.
So a couple of things you mentioned there. One was about a business plan, and two, that you had more locations than McDonald's and all these other companies combined. So I guess my first question would be, for an entrepreneur creating that business plan, because it can be kind of a guessing game a bit, right? I mean, you're making projections and things like that, but what are some of the key things key projections, key items you have in that plan that make you feel confident that a business is a good idea?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always look at the marketplace, and if if a business has to steal share from somebody else, I think it's going to be very difficult
Mm,
to grow that business. You can't guarantee that.
yeah.
The thing about the water business is in the US alone, it was growing at more than $1 billion a year. So if I could come up with this niche, which no one was doing, all I had to do is get a portion of that $1 billion worth of growth each year. So I felt like I had a huge advantage. Number two, in this second stage, a lot of my business model, my customers, Lowe's, Home Depot, and Walmart, Kroger, Safeway, Publix, all of those people I had done business with for the last 10 or 12 years. I had a distribution network that I knew and understood. So I had the credibility. And in fact, I went public before we even had profits or anything else. I went public based on our past history of what we had done and who we knew. And so we had a lot of advantages. So I would say is understanding the growth of your marketplace and then understanding your customer. And our first level of customer is a retailer, because we sell through retailers. So I have talked to those major retailers and I knew they wanted. In fact, Lowe's and Home Depot had asked me for it. So I knew and had some predictability in where I was going.
Yeah, certainly for the second time through, right? Because you had all those relationships and had proven it out before. So you would say, as far as looking at entering a certain business idea, looking at the potential of the market is probably one of the most important factors. Searching for a bit of a blue ocean type situation because you had a new idea in a fast growing market. Would you say those are some of the most important things when you were deciding to go full force with this?
I would say yes, but I would also clarify it a little bit more in saying that we had a specific niche of this exchange process for 5-gallon bottled water that we knew and understood better than anybody else, and we wanted to dominate that niche that I'm talking about. We did dabble a little bit in the single-serve bottle market. It was a total failure. I had no chance to beat Nestle and Coca-Cola and Pepsi in that business. And I learned that very quickly. We needed to focus on something we could be the best at and something we could dominate. And we do have more than 90% market share in that business.
It was what Al Reese, one of his books, talked about. You know, if you can't be first or second in a category, you're going to have a hard time, right, over time. So
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more question on the business side before we segue into your leadership lessons. I'm curious, you said you had more locations than McDonald's and Burger King, all these combined, and you grew so fast in this manner. And I don't know if you can do this or not, but if you could boil down for the listeners, like one key reason why you grew so quickly, or if someone is looking to grow a physical product business, what would you say is the most important, I guess, happening or factor in order to achieve quicker growth?
Yeah. Well, there were several factors that helped us. And number one, Lowe's, Home Depot, and Walmart were building stores like crazy during the 90s. So that really helps you. But the main thing we were able to do is we went out early on and established a presence at a major retailer. We started with Lowe's Home Improvement, actually, instead of Walmart, but Walmart came on very quickly. And we made them a success, a nationally recognized retailer that we made a huge success on. Then we could scale that. Once you have that success, because we had to understand everything from routing, what the displays, what the POP look like, what kind of language that's going to attract consumers and everything about it. You can't scale a business until you understand that. Once you've got it right, then you can scale. And the other thing that we've done, and every time I've swayed away from this, I've failed. We stuck with one product, Blue Rhino propane. We dominate bulk water at Primo Water. We've tried to dabble in sparkling water and doing other things. No, we're good at bulk water. And if you'll be the best at what you do and stick with it, you'll be surprised how large that market can be.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Once you find your thing, stick with that and scale that, right? Instead of trying to dabble in a lot of other things. So very cool. Well, thank you for sharing some of your business wisdom and some of your journey, Billy. Appreciate that very much. I'm sure the listeners do as well. So let's transition to these 5 principles. So along your journey, you shared these with me on the phone the first time we spoke a couple months ago. You said there were these 5 lessons for leadership in life that you've lived by, that you feel like business leaders or movement leaders should or could also incorporate into their own leadership styles. So I don't know if you have them memorized. You probably do. I have them written down here if not, but yeah, I'm sure you do. So why don't we just at a high level go through some of those and why you feel like they've helped you so much?
They have, and I appreciate the ability to share those. You know, as I have started to step away more from day-to-day operations, I've started to do a lot more coaching with with my family, with my business associates, and people are always asking me, what are the leadership skills that you look for and what has helped you be successful? And I'm trying to boil it down into 5 things that I think that have really helped me, and hopefully it can help others. And the first one is, I tell people, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to dream big. People don't want to be part of something small. It's whether you're trying to get investors or you're trying to recruit people to your company. Everybody wants to be a part of the next Amazon. So I think you have to dream big. And in reality, it's not that much harder to build a big company than it is to build a small company. You have the same problems. There's just more people to manage them. So I think dream big is my first one. The second one is authenticity and being authentic. I think to build trust, you have to be who you are. People want to trust somebody who does not put on any kind of face or something that's not transparent. I go back to a story, and I learned this. George Bush, when he was running for president, 43, I had the opportunity to have lunch with him right after he lost the New England primary. And he was telling me the story. He said, Billy said, my dad called me home and he told me, he said, George said, you were up there telling people that you went to Harvard and Yale and you were trying to act like this Ivy League scholar. He said, and George, that's not you. You're from Waco, Texas. You walk like it and you talk like it. They're either going to like you for who you are or they're not. But for God's sake, don't try to be something you're not. Resonated with me because here's a guy, you know, I'm raising money in Boston and New York. I got this Southern drawl and, people look at you sometimes, but it really made me feel comfortable. Hey, I'm going to be who I am and people are going to learn to trust me for who I am because I'm not putting on any kind of anything. So
you felt like that helped you? Maybe just, well, obviously it did. Because, yeah, you're from rural North Carolina, and here you are in New York or something, talking big numbers. Did you feel like people were turned off at all by that, or you just could care less and you were just going to be you? Or is that something you had to develop?
I had to learn to feel comfortable with myself.
Yeah.
Would ask me a lot of times, now, where are you from? Where'd you get that accent? And so on.
Right.
Never forget, I was up there once and speaking in a big audience, about 500 people at the one of the clubs up there raising money. And I said, guys, let me tell you something. I know I talk slow, but I think fast. A lot of you guys ought to try it every once in a while. So they got a big laugh, and a lot of people will talk to me about that. But I do think it's important to feel good about yourself and be proud of it. Don't try.
So the first one was dream big. Second, be yourself, be authentic.
Authentic, yes. The third one is discipline, and I think you have to have a routine that whether your company, your personal life, everything about it. For example, myself, I've got a routine. I work out, I read scripture in the morning, I go work out, and then I'm ready to start my day, and I've got certain things, and I take care of my health and my other things in life. At our companies, we always had a routine. We go through every month the same way. We've got a routine. Everybody knows it. I think having a certain discipline in life has really helped me and helped the success of our companies. The fourth one is resilience. And that goes back to that Walmart story. It's, you are going to have some tough times. And as CEO, I used to pride myself that if somebody walked in my office the day that I had lost a big customer, that I would treat them no different and they would not be able to tell that anything had happened. Treated everybody the same way. I was very open with our employees, and I tried to be the example to get through the tough times and explain that there's going to be tough times in life. The people who get through it are rewarded.
How did you develop that resiliency mindset?
Well, I think it came through from my childhood, from getting through some tough times as a child. And so it's that discipline of growing up on the farm and then getting through the tough times of my father and grandfather passing away and me doing it on my own. Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah. And the last one is I tell people, and it's helped me, is I make God the foundation of my life and principles. And I can tell you, if you build your life on that foundation, you understand that there's bigger things than losing a customer or having some setback over here or some little health issue or an employee issue. You understand there's a lot bigger things in life, and people are going to see that in you, and a lot of people are going to follow that. So that's just been critical in my life.
Right. Okay. So those are the 5 that you have crystallized some of your key reasons for having a successful business in life around those 5 things. You mentioned you're doing some coaching. Like, what are you doing to share those lessons with more people now?
Yeah, I'm starting to have time to do more things like this podcast, and I've done some others and still doing some. I'm also having the opportunity to do more speaking engagements, whether it's at YPO events. I speak a lot at some of the local universities and entrepreneurial settings.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
And what kind of impact do you want to make with the second half of your life?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that and really researched it. And I just finished a program called Halftime, and one of the things that we did in Halftime, we write a personal mission statement or a purpose. And I sort of see my purpose and my mission statement for this next chapter is to use my entrepreneurial skills and experiences to inspire my family, my business associates, and my community to live a better life. And I feel like that if that allows me the specific enough that I'm trying to make an impact and inspire other people to be good entrepreneurs, to help the right people, and to give back to my communities that have done so much for me. And that's what I'm working on.
Very good. Yep. Inspiring and impacting those people. So, all right, Billy. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming by and sharing some insights about your business background, your 5 lessons, some of the plans you have for the future. As we wrap up this discussion, anything else you'd like to share with the audience that we didn't talk about, and then we'll wrap this up.
Well, John, first, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I think that we've covered a lot, and I'd like others to just think about, you can be an entrepreneur. If so, I think some of the leadership traits that I talked about hopefully can help you be successful.
Absolutely. Very good. And if people do want to get in touch with you more, Billy, I think you have a book. I'll link to that below this video recording on the show notes page. But any other ways for people, if they want to get a hold of you or have you speak or any of that kind of stuff for their organizations, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, you feel free to email me. I'm at bprim@primowater.com.
bprim@primowater.com. All right, sounds good. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Billy Prim, who founded and exited Blue Rhino, and he now is the chairman of the board of Primo Water Corporation. Hope you enjoyed this discussion with Billy, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.